Are you doing roll call? All those opposed, extensions, can I get a roll call, please?
Adam Kavanaugh.
Here.
Zachary Domian. Here. Alexander Fabrias.
Here.
Micah Rowe.
Here.
Brian Carroll. Here. Ali Schoenfeld.
Here.
Dr. Tilly. Here. Morganweg. Jay Regan. Here. Joshua Rivera. Isabel Boulier. Luis Garde. Anthony Cardez.
Here.
Gary Peter. Fiona Dolan.
Here.
Sarah App. Joseph
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Robbins.
Here.
Shirley Here.
Rapid fire.
All right, and now executive reports, are there any motions?
Motion to go executive report. Second.
All those in favor for going executive report? All opposed, extensions, executive report, now for Ron. We're now in Senate reports.
Motion to go Senate report. Second.
All those in favor for going Senate report? All opposed. Extensions, Senate report, now for Gone. Old business. Motion to open business.
Second.
All in favor of opening old business? All those opposed? Extensions. We are now in old business. Are there any piece of legislation for old business?
Motion to rescind the vote on SS 48-083 of amending Article 5, Section 4 of the student center bylaws.
Second.
All those in favor of rescinding the vote on that bill? All those opposed? Abstention. All right, that.
Motion to limit debate to 5 minutes.
Second. All in favor of limiting debate to 5 minutes? All abstentions are now limited to 5 minutes. And our parliamentarian.
Motion to amend, if you could scroll down, please.
Right, go.
To add a line D, to that ABC section that reads, act as the sole channel of spending funds from the student activities fee reserve account.
Second.
All in favor of making that amendment? All those opposed?
Point of personal privilege, can you read?
I think you have it written down.
It's,
Okay.
Act as the sole channel of spending funds from the student activity fees reserve account. And just to expand upon it, I know a lot of concerns people had with the treasurer now chairing the allocations committee is that the treasurer would have too many, would have too much power. And currently the treasurer can allocate funds from the student activities fee reserve account just by reaching out to the leaders of all the different orgs, but by now means that the allocations committee is the only way to spend money from the reserve account. It therefore limits the treasurer's power even more and creates more checks and balances. So that way more people go into making the decisions on how the money will be spent.
Can you scroll down, please? Just for a review. Whoa. Oh, okay.
Motion to call the bill to question.
Second.
All those in favor of calling this bill to question? All those opposed? Abstention, bill not being called to question.
Yes.
Zach Domian,
Yes.
Zach Lafferty.
Yep.
Monroe.
Yes. Yes.
Tilly.
Yes.
Jason again.
Yes.
Josh Rivera, Isabel Boulier,
Yes.
Lee Gardner.
Yes.
Yes.
Riley Gator.
Yes.
Joe Pizzoli,
Yes.
Alexander Robin. Yes. Pierre Kumar.
Yes.
Stephen Irwin.
Any other motions? I'm sorry. Any other piece of legislation for old business?
Motion to rescind the vote on SS 48-075, a bill amending Article 7, Section 7 of the student senate bylaws.
All those in favor of rescinding the vote on that piece of legislation? All those opposed? Abstentions? We now rescind the vote and reconsider it. Do I have any people?
I can do that real quick.
Motion to limit debate to 5 minutes.
Adam.
Just to kind of review what this section specifically talks about, even though it's titled academic allocations, it was still being handled by the allocations committee. that was just established. This is just specifically the process outlining specifically academic allocation requests, which now fall under the jurisdiction of the allocations committee, which is why the section title is allocations committee. And it details specifically that process that can be expanded more upon by the committee.
Any other people for the speakers list? Motion to call this vote to question.
Second.
All in favor of calling this vote to question? All those opposed? Abstentions, bills now being called to question. Adam Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Zach Domian,
Yes.
Zach LaFontaine,
Yes.
Mike Rowe,
Yes.
Brett Cross,
Yeah.
Ellie Trumbull. Yes. Matt Tilley,
Yes.
Second Amendment, Jason McGinn, Brett Kavanaugh, Lee DeGarcia, Riley Peter, Deanna Dolan. Yep. Michaela Alf. Joe Pistoli,
Yes.
Alexandra Robin,
Yes.
Kiara Shimer, Stephen Nielsen.
Mandates.
If you get the same.
Any other people
You get it.
for business?
Introducing SS48
No, let's make-
by the bill striking appendix A from the student senate bylaw. Regular.
Would you like to elaborate?
I would like, yes, so as we couldn't do it last week because we did not pass the bill for the council, we had to kind of keep this in place due to the fact that we did vote on this, we would have got rid of all of this and stricken it from the bylaws. So basically, this is what this essentially is doing is taking this out. So we are no longer. And it will be going into the what we previously just worked on, so.
Do I have any speakers for the speakers list? Alex?
So we're striking this, and what section are we moving this
This information was moved to Article 5, Sections 4 and 5, because it included the charters for ad hoc committees and councils.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the speakers list?
Motion to call this bill into question?
Second.
All those in favor of calling this vote to question? All those opposed? Abstentions, bill not being called to question. Oh, that's me.
Same.
Adam Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Zach Domian,
Yes.
LaFontaine,
Yes.
Mike Rowe,
Yes.
Yes.
Ellie Trumbull, Matt Tilley,
Yes.
Mackenzie Margot. Yes. Jason Regan,
Yes.
Josh Rangera, Isabel Boyer,
Yes.
Lee DeGarcia,
Yeah.
That's me.
Ashley Harris, Riley Peter,
Maybe you come to.
Deanna Dolan.
Yep.
Michaela. Joe Pistoli,
Yes.
Alexandra Robin. Yes. Kiara Shimer,
Yes.
Stephen Nielsen.
Stay.
All right, this bill passes. Any other piece of legislation for old business?
Motion to close old business.
I know.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
Adam.
I'm gonna veto that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna veto that one.
Zach.
Introducing SS48 089, bill amending Article 5, Section 5 of the Student Senate Constitution, so that we'll consider.
Would you like to elaborate?
Yes.
The one all the way in the back, this is important.
So for this bill, I want to so,
Zeros.
that's one of them.
So it just.
You already did. So this is the bill that changes the role of the treasurer slightly in a few ways, and then some more substantial ways. The first one is that the treasurer now reports to the vice president as kind of that organizational chart highlighted in order to have the student body president focus on more of the external communication to the student body. That's one change that would happen to allow the vice president to kind of oversee more of the internal Senate processes. But the secretary and the treasurer, they would still report to the executive board at large, but the vice president would now be responsible for kind of those conversations with the treasurer taking place. And then obviously chairing the allocations committee, which was just established as a way to streamline finance duties from student senate, from the vice president and this silo to now one streamlined body that can take care of all those requests in one. And as we previously discussed during Wednesday and last week, chair the finance committee as we look to best serve the student body and to make sure that student senate is operating the most efficiently we can. Having one position chair the finance committee, along with other members of the student senate serving on that committee, is a way to make sure that we can have student senators in other roles within the councils and within other committees.
Anyone, would anyone like to add their name to the speaker?
Have whatever sections of the bylaws related to the finance committee and the allocations committee been like appropriately augmented to reflect this change, all of them that would affect. I think so. but I should-
Go ahead, Adam.
So this is the first step in order to change that process. Since it is the Constitution, it needs to be approved by Senate, the student body, and then President Malice. So at what time that process moves throughout, then we would make sure that all parts of the bylaws line up with this change. We have taken steps with the allocations committee and other entities to make sure that those align where we can. But kind of that cleanup on the back end would be later on.
And it is planned to happen.
Yes.
Izzy?
Briefly, I can't remember if this was in what meeting minutes this was in, but to refresh, is the treasurer a voting member of the finance committee, the allocations committee?
Point of, or
Yes, go ahead.
are you speaking to currently or if this bill were to pass?
If this bill is to pass.
No, I would not be.
Mm-hmm.
Or treasurer would not be either.
Zach is the permanent.
Just-
treasurer.
So, just to be clear, the Senate treasurer, if this passes, would be now reporting to the vice president instead of the president. So my point about that is just like, maybe I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. I'm just a little concerned about, they would still report to e-board at large, correct? So, yeah, that's correct, right?
Mhm.
That's the point. I was trying-
Okay.
That's- I was,
Answer its own question.
Anyone- Adrian? Well, can anyone be able to speak? If you go, Ali, go ahead.
I would say to kind of get your head wrapped around like who reports to who. It is more of, if there is like a grievance by some other entity. This is the person who you would go talk to, if the treasurer is like doing something that's not right, you would go inform the vice president that this needs to be addressed to the treasurer. Overall, the treasurer is still going to work harmoniously with the rest of the board. Same thing with all these other positions reporting to those two entities. But it's more or less like, if there is a problem, this is the person who is going to bring it, who's going to address it to that position.
Mike?
Oh, wow. There's a short speakers list. Well, I know that while this bill is like also trying to make it so that the treasurer can use the allocations committee and chair the finance committee to lessen like the duties of the vice president. So I just find it a bit confusing that they'd have to report to the vice president in comparison to the president. Like, would that add an extra workload to the vice president at all?
So currently, the vice president does kind of chair cabinet as well as the executive board. So the functional workload of the vice president would not change. It would just help make sure that there are certain positions that the president, mostly dealing with the external Senate communication, director of communications and parliamentarian who chairs the elections council, versus the secretary and treasurer would report to the vice president. So that way, since the vice president deals with internal affairs and these roles are more internal to Senate, they would focus on those two roles, and then the president would be able to focus on the director of communications and the parliamentarian.
Okay.
Anyone else agree with this? Second. All those in favor of the question? All opposed? Question should not be called a question. Adam Cat.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain?
Yes.
Ali Shaw.
Yes.
Matt Kelly.
Yes.
Mackenzie Mortimer. Yes.
Yes.
Josh O'Hara. Isabel Foley.
Yes.
Luigi Becker.
No.
Ashley Harris.
Abstain.
Riley Peter. Yes. Deanna Jones. No. Michaela?
No.
Joe Stewart?
Stay.
Alexandra Robin?
Yes.
Kara Schuma?
Yes.
Stephen Nelson? Yeah?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, crap. I was making an explanation real quick. I'll say yes.
Ashley Hale?
No.
Joe Stewart?
Yes.
Okay, this still passes.
Introducing SS48 090, bill amending Article 5, Section 8, of the Citizens Constitution for legal consideration.
Would you like to elaborate?
So this bill, similarly to the last one, establishes a new position, whereas the last one kind of changed some duties of the treasurer. This one would formally create a director of communications position. A few things to note here. Section 8, if this bill passes, Section 8 would move to Section 9 in a different bill, so the language will not be lost. That's in a coming bill. And specifically about the role of the director of communications, they would create and facilitate a Senate web presence, inform the student body on the actions of the student senate, be responsible for the public image and promotion of Senate, and report to the president. Since this is an external role, it does make sense to have it focus or report to the person that focuses on external affairs for Senate. And then know on Wednesday, there is some discussion and possible amendments to be made. So looking forward to hearing those. But this bill would allow the current structure of the PR chair to be able to move up to e-board similarly to other organizations on campus and student governments across the country to make sure that the PR chair currently can have that support of e-board and support of the Senate as a whole as a member of the executive board.
I'm sorry, speakers list, I'm sorry, people on it, so I'll go with Matt, Jay, Izzy.
I just have a quick motion. So the reason, should I say it first or should I
Yes.
just?
Motion.
So I'll motion to make a amendment between line B and C, saying obtain approval for statements made on behalf of the student senate. This is something that is already pretty much done, but I'm leaving it purposely vague enough that like the future director of communications does not need to go and say every single thing needs to be approved. Right now, it is currently encouraged, and I believe it is like required, but it doesn't say anywhere that it's required, that the director of communications obtain approval for statements on behalf of the student senate. And what I mean by this is like the statement that was sent out earlier this week that was sent to the group me and approved that way. And I left it, like I said, vague enough so that smaller statements can just be posted rather than just, obviously the bigger ones have to come to the Senate. Like I said, this obviously was a requirement, but it didn't say anywhere, so I thought it should just be put in the job description.
Is that free?
How does that differ from the line C, informing the student, that's student body? Never mind. It's on.
Second. All those in favor of making that amendment? All those opposed? Abstentions? Change has now been made. No, not Matt, Jay.
I have. First of all, is this, did we decide if this is gonna be an elected internal position or an appointed position?
Sure.
So on Wednesday, post Wednesday, discussions were had about how to find a middle ground, for this. And so when we get to a bill on the consent agenda, I'll be pulling it out to make an amendment. But essentially what we're gonna do is after, elections are had, there's gonna be the caucuses after the meetings. The first two will be for internal elections for VP, treasurer, and secretary. The following caucuses will be so that, the people who are going for the positions of director of communications and parliamentarian can come to the caucus and like give a speech and present, to the student senate. And then the student senate will vote by secret ballot, and only the president will see the, results of the secret ballot. And then when the president, has the interviews with the candidates for those two positions, they can use, the secret ballot, the results of that, to gather, input, from the student senate about who they would prefer as a candidate, and use that to influence who they decide to appoint for the position of parliamentarian or director of communications.
So to clarify, internal secret ballot is not binding. It's just an expression of the preference of Senate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good solution. I like that. Compromise.
Do you have another question?
Yep.
Okay, Izzy.
So to inquire, we have, I guess, kind of a general list of what the director of communications would do. However, I was looking at the e-board responsibilities. Now, is there a way to kind of include just a general overarching statement of additional responsibilities that may be at the discretion? Like, I think if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, the director of communications has dealings with, social retreats or social thingies. I don't even know what they're called anymore. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So since it is a constitution, most of the time that language is usually kept vague.
Okay.
And just to make sure that we have the general duties that would be required and not change from year to year.
Mhm.
In the bylaws is where we can get a little more specific with kind of those duties.
Okay.
And then each Senate could change some of those specific responsibilities outlined in the e-board responsibilities.
Gotcha.
So just to make sure that if two Senates down the road, they decide that the social should actually be done by the VP, instead of needing to amend the whole constitution again, get approval from the student body and President Mialis. It gives us a little more latitude in the kind of the first few years while we get the position kind of ironed out.
I have a follow-up, and please tell me if this is completely unrelated. Does e-board have their share of transition binders? And if so, are those things that are being transferred from those positions being outlined to the new potential people?
Yes, that's one of the reasons that the transition binders have been pushed back, so that we can make sure that all of the positions where they fall will be included in the right transition binder with the right people being able to help inform those.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jack?
Since it's depending on the direction of future amendments, but as the way that it currently stands, this, I believe, is appointed as it stands, and it probably will remain to be without anything else I was talking about. I'm just curious if there's a list or if there's a range, or if you have general ideas, especially from the president, of the kind of qualifications that we seek in somebody whom we would want to be the director of communications.
Procedure, I don't think that falls within the confines of this. Anyone else who's gonna do this?
Motion to call this question.
Second. All those in favor of calling this question? All opposed? Abstentions? There will now be one question.
Yes.
Damian?
Yes.
Scott
Yes.
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
Mackenzie. Yes. Jason Megan.
Yes.
Josh O'Hara. Isabel Bollier.
Here, yes,
Kate Gregor.
Yes.
Ashley Harris.
Yes.
I do it every time.
Deanna Gold.
Yes.
Michaela Hack. Joe Pistoli.
Yes.
Alexandra Robbins. Yes. Pierre Schima.
Yes.
Stephen Nelson.
Yes.
School classes.
And piece of legislation that
Introducing SS48 087, bill amending Article 5, Sections 1, 2, and 9 of the Student Senate Constitution.
would you like to elaborate?
So this bill, now that we've kind of adjusted the roles on the executive board, this bill seeks to clarify some of the language that was previously included, specifically for membership. Now that we have a director of communications that was just established, we have to make them part of the executive board formally in the membership section. You can see here the language appointed by the president from outside of the membership of Student Senate, confirmed by the Student Senate. So that allows future amendments to be made to a later bill, while also clarifying that this is an appointed position. If we can scroll down to the authority. There's just a clarification to add the councils, like we'll be doing throughout the rest of the Constitution. And then finally, for executive board vacancies, now that we have a new position, we have to establish that. And this is also section 8 that we struck in a previous bill, and that is being added in section 9 with the addition of director of communications.
I will open a speakers list.
Motion to limit debate to 7 minutes.
Okay, second.
Second?
All those in favor of limiting debate to 7 minutes? All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, debate's now limited to 7 minutes. I'll start speakers list.
Motion to call this bill into question.
Second. All in favor of calling this bill to question?
Wasn't there an amendment to be made on this one, or is that another bill?
Different one.
That's a different one?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
All those opposed?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, this bill's not being called.
Yes.
Youngin?
Yes.
Yes.
Michael Rob?
Yes.
Yes.
Ollie Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Matt Tully?
Yes.
Mackenzie Morgan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Lee Bigger? Ashley Davis? Yep. Ellie Beder? Fiona Don?
Yep.
Michaela Apter? Jeremy School?
Yes.
Alexander Stratton?
Yes.
Stephen. Any other pieces of legislation that
Introducing SS 48-088, a bill amending Article 5, Section 3, 4, 6, and 7 of the Constitution for consideration.
So this now clarifies all of the AP board positions, president, vice president, secretary, and parliamentarian, with some of the previously made changes and a few new. Ally, if you could scroll. So starting with the president, it just kind of clarifies the section heading to make it consistent, and then adds the appointment of the director of communications in, as well as adding a line working with the director of communications for external Senate correspondence, since it would be falling to the director of communications to assist with that. It makes sense to include that in the job description of the president. And then, as we've seen with this year, with the current student body president handling internal elections, that change is also made to reflect the internal elections handbook and what that process outlines. In the role of the vice president, there was actually nothing in there about assisting the president with their duties. Most of us probably know that the vice president usually assists in the absence of the president and assists as needed. So this just kind of outlines that, and also strikes the executive council from something that the VP would chair. More discussion on that on a future bill that I'm sure our advisor can shed more light on then. And then for the secretary, makes a few clarifications reporting to the vice president as it is an internal position. And in the absence of the parliamentarian, chairs the elections council, change from committee, specifically just for external elections, not internal. And then finally, with the parliamentarian, reporting to the president, because the parliamentarian currently reports to no one, not a soul. So important clarification. And then adding chairing the elections council, which was a change made to the bylaws.
I'll start our speakers list.
My personal preference is to the vice president.
Second.
All those in favor of limiting debate to 3 minutes? All those opposed? Abstentions? Debate's now being limited to 3 minutes. Alex?
I have a question about line after the vice president. Because in a next bill, we're getting rid of the executive council. That's going to flow. What's going to happen with the vice president? Are they still going to sit on the council? Is it just strictly all the presidents of all the organizations coming?
I yield to our advisor.
Yeah.
So the It will primarily be the director of student program leadership, calling a meeting of the chairs of the different organizations. Maybe on occasion, the VP may get invited, depending on maybe whatever the content is, that may be discussed in the meeting, because it's more relative to the VP and their awareness of different pieces, but it will primarily be the chairs of the.
And a follow-up question to that, is that going to be like a monthly thing, or is it gonna be like a special occasion that we need to get all the chairs together for?
To follow up, it will most likely be when the director calls a meeting. I imagine maybe at most twice a semester.
Thank you.
Any other people for the speakers list? Motion to call this vote to question.
Second.
All in favor of calling this vote to question? All opposed? Bills not being called to question.
Adam Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Damian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mike Rowe.
Yes.
Brian Crow. Ally Tolwell. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Chris Megan.
Yes.
Josh O'Mara. Isabel Bollier. Yes. Adrian Geifer.
Yes.
Ashley Harris.
Yes.
Harry Davis. Joanna Dolan.
Yes.
Michaela App. Dick Floyd. Alexander Robin.
Yes.
Kara Schumann.
Yes.
Stephen Nelson.
Yes.
Crystal Paul.
Any other cases? Dash.
Introducing SS48.091, a bill amendment Article 6, Section 1 and 2 of the Students in the Constitution for your consideration.
Would you like to elaborate?
I would be introducing.
So for this bill, this removes the executive council from the Student Senate Constitution. As our advisor noted, the direction that SPLO and other organizations have moved in is to, instead of having the executive council, move to the director's council. And because it's no longer going to be run out of Student Senate and have that Student Senate component with the chair being from Student Senate, that's why we're removing it from the Constitution, so that as the nature of the Director's Council evolves in the future, that will be able to go in our bylaws if and when that's appropriate, once the Director of Student Programs, Leadership and Orientation establishes a regular cadence versus needing to amend it in our Constitution each time that change is made. And I yield the rest of my time to our advisor. Director's Council.
Oh, okay.
She was like, huh?
Sorry. Delve in solid. Could you please read? I'm sorry, I'm so lost. Can you please just frame what I'm explaining?
Why the purpose
Oh,
of
why we're
change?
getting, why ex-con's going away when we're becoming director.
Yes, and also why there's more value in the bylaws than
Sure,
Constitution.
Sorry. Okay. So the history of ex-con was, the chairs and it being orchestrated by the VP of Senate. Over the years, they have done different things, but nowadays, the student org chairs really need specific support that wouldn't necessarily come from an agenda from the vice president of Student Senate. And it has been better when it is something of sharing, collaborating ideas, when the director of student programs, leadership and orientation has orchestrated the agenda of the meeting. And also being more aware of the different, nuances going on within the different boards in the student body. So, in ex-con shifting from planning like org retreats to now, how can we better serve the student body, our orgs being support, what is that we need, that is becoming a better resource in it moving to being under the umbrella or being orchestrated by student programs and being called directors council. What is the second part of the question again?
Why it's better suited for the bylaws and the Constitution.
Okay, and it not being in the Constitution, as has been said in other pieces of legislation, anytime there is a change, it has to go through student body to approve. Student body has no idea what ex-con is or anything like that. So why would they care? Also, if it does come to the point where we can change who is going to be the membership of the Directors Council, being within the bylaws, the Student Senate as well as organizations have that latitude to make and orchestrate those changes.
We'll open a speakers list. I'll start with Mike.
Hello. So I just have like a quick question for you. Because I know that like the executive council and like other constitutions and orgs, all of them have like a requirement, like they don't even have to specify all this information, but they all like specify that requirement that they at least have to attend. So my wondering is like, why aren't we just including that like simple requirement within it? Is that gonna be moved to the bylaws? Is that just something sort of outdated terminology? Yeah, just simple question.
Yield to the advisor.
So within this bill, it is, but within within the grouping of legislation, it would move to the bylaws. And we are also going to inform the other boards after this legislation changes that they should also update their constitutions to align the language of it being Directors Council, and that it does have a little more latitude of where it should exist, and the regularity of the meetings.
Thank you.
Alex? Anyone else for the speakers list?
Motion to call this bill to question?
All those in favor of the question? All opposed? Slow down and call the question.
Adam Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Joe Meehan,
Yes.
Rob Holdren,
Yes.
Mike Earl,
Yes.
Brian Crow,
Yes.
Ellie Jonquil.
Yes.
Matt Sully.
Yes.
Mackenzie Morgan. Yes. Jason Reed. Josh Angara.
Yes.
Ashley Harris.
Abstain.
Riley Peter. Fiona Dolan.
Oh, yeah.
Matt.
No.
Alexandra Hoppe.
Yes.
Hiroshima.
Yes.
Ethan Nasman.
Yes.
Yeah. Jack.
Introducing SS48 094, implementing Article 8, Section 8, Section 3 through 5 of the State Senate Constitution for vote consideration.
Dr. Roberts?
So for this bill, if we can scroll down a little bit. Perfect. So this just changes some of the language in, as well as clarifying some of the section numbers and headings, just to make it more consistent. Currently, there's no section titles, so the sections just kind of lack clarity. So this would add the facilitator of the election as the Senate parliamentarian versus just stating a sentence that might not mean the same thing to everyone. Also clarifies that the parliamentarian is only responsible for external elections, as we established that the president is handling internal elections. Also make some more changes to the elections requirement, adding some of the language, changing up student body president and so on. And that's the extent of this bill.
Anyone for the speakers list? Joe?
I was gonna say, is there supposed to be a section 1 or is just that like?
Adam?
There is a section 1, it's not being amended, which is why it's not being included in this bill.
Can I ask what would be section 1?
I don't know.
Section 1 is simply the elections, the spring elections taking place at this time.
Anyone else to speak on this? Alex?
Is the special elections process was this begin after March first just because it's so close? And what does that line mean? Point of information.
Yeah, so, and if, I would encourage, an amendment if we feel it's not as specific as the intention is. This is referring to an example being the Senate. Doing a special election for Senate 48 right now, due to there being elections in process for Senate 49, would not be best, due to us being in the process for electing Senate 49 right now. Doing Senate 49 elections, if I was to do Senate 49 special elections, then doing Senate 48 elections right now would not be, the best practice. So that's what that line would be the intention of. If we feel that there should be an amendment to make that line more specific, that might be beneficial. But that is the intention behind that line, just using our current situation as an example.
Motion to amend.
Either that one.
The special elections process will cease to begin after March 1st, and then I think we should state as like a clarification statement due to the process of electing the following Senate. Like, I don't know. Someone want to help word with that?
Yeah.
Sorry, a point there, can you take out will cease to begin, because now that I'm reading it again, I remember literally reading this line like 6 times being like, what does that mean? Like, I don't know why that's so confusing to me, so cease to begin, can we word that again?
Can we just eliminate to begin and then the line would read the special election process will cease after March 1st?
Is it a statement in the
So, like,
negative?
any opportunity for a special election will cease.
Or is that the
Like-
negative?
So, hold on. I'm gonna veto. Get
I
something
yield
else.
to Ellen. I would encourage an amendment to specify this line to read special elections process for the current Senate will cease to begin after March 1st.
That,
Or something more along those lines. Because if you're electing for the next Senate, or does that make you, or is that more confusing?
Brian, yeah.
I was gonna suggest that it should read, there will be no more special elections held after March 1st.
Point of information, the bylaws and constitution cannot be written, or should not be written in the negative, and that is why it's written in such a confusing manner. Yeah, that's why it is written in such a yucky manner, and you can.
Get Michaela first and then.
So can we just write any special election processes will begin after March 1st?
Point of information, if we wrote that, then we couldn't do a special election for Senate 49 at that point.
Will someone yield?
I yield to Adrian.
Yeah, I'll go Ashley and then Ally will yield to.
Any special election processes for the current Senate will conclude before March 1st. Right? That's the same idea.
That's still negative.
no,
No.
Is it supposed to conclude before March 1st or not started before March 1st?
Ally, you'll yield to Adrian.
May I suggest that any special elections, any special elections process you can't use cease or you cannot?
You can use that word.
Okay, any special elections process will cease. You can't use may not be conducted, or can you?
You can use it, it's just.
Okay, so I was gonna say, any special election process may not be conducted between March 1st and the conclusion of the spring elections.
Would you like to make that motion?
motion to make that amendment.
Second.
All those in favor of making that amendment? All those opposed? Abstentions? Stop. Now been made. All right. Anyone else for the speakers list?
We should call this bill into question.
Friendly amendment. Can we just
Veto.
capitalize spring elections? Yeah. Sorry, that's just me.
All right,
I don't-
Motion to call this bill into
Necessary.
question.
Second, all in favor of calling for the question?
Had to get it in there.
All opposed? Abstentions? Bill is now being called to question.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, did not mean to like verbally express that.
Okay, I'm Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
McGraw.
Yes.
Yes.
Mattson.
Yes.
Mackenzie Morgan. Jason Megan.
Yes.
Isabel Boyer.
Yes.
Louise.
Yeah.
Riley Peter. Fiona Gold.
Yes.
Lily.
Yes.
Alexander Roberts. Yes. Gary Schuster. Stephen Allen.
Yes.
Go Puck.
Motion to reconsider this vote that was just taken as our advisor has another idea.
Second.
All those in favor of reconsidering this vote? Oh, never mind.
Sorry.
All opposed? Abstentions? Consider the vote on that House bill.
I yield to the advisor.
Please roll like. Okay. Because this is also referring to any election, spring election, or does it also consider the fall? Because,
Like in this part?
yeah,
Mhm.
because would you want to have a special election prior to the fall election? That's really just what I'm getting. I would like, want to make sure, like, is it specific to the spring or is this all inclusive of those regular elections? Because if that is the case, I would suggest that somebody also add in there that a special election cannot be conducted prior to the fall election.
To amend,
What's your amendment?
to add a line, before, any special election, or after, actually. Any special elections may not be conducted between, fall elections and March 1st.
Wait, hold on.
No.
He's adding an amendment after that one. Right?
Yeah, but
between March 1st and fall election, I mean, between fall elections and March 1st.
The way you made it sound is like we can't have any special election. Oh, like in March first.
Yeah.
You want to
No
switch that?
special elections before the fall election, is what I meant, sorry.
The opening of the academic year.
Point of-
Point of personal privilege. Can we please stick to the speakers list?
Was that a motion? Was that a formal motion?
Yes,
Point of personal privilege.
to read that there may not be, or, no special elections will be held, before the fall elections or after March 1st.
Point of inquiry, I thought we wanted to, wait, can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought we wanted to have a special election for 49. So if we have that in there, if we do this amendment, won't we not allowed to be doing a special election for 49 until after fall elections? So we shouldn't put that in.
So,
Over.
so there was not a second, so
Point of information.
yes.
Our advisor can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the intentionality behind this is to make sure that once the beginning of the academic year starts, that there's not a special election in that kind of 3 weeks to month window between the start of the academic year and the fall elections taking place. as the fall elections would be that time to add new senators onto Senate.
Yield to Ally.
Cool.
With that intentionality, I would suggest, some sort of amendment to say, I'm trying to write this on, to suggest an amendment, not a negative, special elections, fall elections, special elections in the fall semester should begin after the first year in transfer elections.
So that wasn't enough for what you.
If-
Yeah,
if
just,
that-
like,
if someone
confusing.
wants to make that
Motion
amendment.
to make that amendment.
Second, all in favor of making that amendment? All opposed? Abstention? That amendment is now being made. All those in favor of calling this vote a question? All opposed? Abstention? All right, I'll veto that.
It's totally minor, it's totally minor.
All right, never mind, well. All right, still being called to question. Still being called to question, so we're voting.
Okay. Adam Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Zach Goodman.
Yes.
Jack Fontaine.
Yes.
Mike Rowe.
Yes.
Frank Harris.
Yes.
Ally Her-
Yes.
Ally Jones.
Yes.
Mackenzie Morton. Dave Regan.
Yes.
Josh Rangera, Isabel Bollier.
Yes.
Keith Garcia.
Yes.
Ashley Hayes. Riley Peter. Fiona Dolan.
Yes.
Michaela Apple. Joe Pistoli.
Yes.
Andrew Robbins.
Yes.
Kara Schiemann. Stephen Nelson.
Yes.
Bill passes.
Any other pieces of legislation for old business? That,
Moving along to the consent agenda.
Wow, really?
Ooh.
No.
Yeah, there's one more. Is there one more? 97. There's 97.
97. Yes. That one was important.
Yes. So introducing SS48-097, a bill amendment Article 12, section 153 of the Constitution, whether considered.
would you like to elaborate?
So in here, not only are we adding section headers and to clarify what that process looks like to make sure it's more consistent. So section 1 would be titled impeachment regulations. And then we would just remove the section 2 header and it's in one section. And then in section 3, the impeachment process, it would note that in the absence of the parliamentarian, the vice president shall preside over these hearings. Because currently, if the parliamentarian is not able to attend the meeting, is not able to be present, or is in some way biased towards the impeachment process, then their impeachment process per our constitution could not take place because there'd be no one to be able to facilitate that process. Which is why it's just saying that the vice president, as someone that deals with internal affairs, would be able to do that in the absence of the parliamentarian. And a few changes down below to there, and just the two things.
Ashley?
Yeah, I understand that the vice president was chosen as the backup option if the parliamentarian can't do it. But why was it considered, or if it wasn't, why not? To potentially have the director of communications be the backup person, since they're also supposed to be a nonpartisan member of student
I can take it.
Who I want to yield?
Yield.
Go ahead.
Okay. You don't have to yell, I can actually just.
Okay.
So through discussion, actually this came up in bylaw review committee, because this is also in the bylaws, through the impeachment process. And it came up through discussions with the impeachment process and realizing that if somebody wanted to impeach the parliamentarian, who would preside over those meetings, it would at this point be nobody, because the parliamentarian should not and cannot preside over those meetings. That would be a little bit biased. So, the discussion there sort of led to the vice president, as the vice president presides over internal Senate affairs. And although they are not a neutral party on Senate, the Director of Communications is very much in charge of, or is, because now the position exists, or hopefully exists, would be very much in charge of external Senate imaging, external messaging and presence, Senate social medias and web presence and digital footprints. As that was made. But that's sort of why that came about. But that's sort of why that discussion happened, and that is in the bylaws. But that bill hasn't come to the floor yet with that part in the impeachment. So if this is amended to change something, then that would be made as well.
Jay?
Sorry, not to get too granular, but if the parliamentarian is absent. Not to get like really in the weeds, but I'm just, if this, a constitutional crisis could come.
Wait, hold on. So you're, point of information or personal privilege, you're inquiring that if the parliamentarian, could you just clarify your statement again?
Yeah, in the event that the parliamentarian is absent for whatever reason, and the vice president is the person being impeached, then who would preside? Not to get too granular, it's very unlikely.
So are you looking for like a, almost very similar to like the United States where they have like a whole procession?
No, I just,
It's, I'm just inquiring.
I just noticed it, and I was curious if there was thought put into it.
All in favor of limited debate to 5 minutes? All opposed? Abstentions? It's all limited 5 minutes.
I don't want a line of like succession. I'm just curious. I saw it pointed out. I see that could be potential for a question in the future. So I'm just curious if, what to make.
Questions?
Sometimes,
Go ahead.
In the event that scenario would take place, I think there would be some pause in having the impeachment at that point in time, just because you would already be down 2. And if it was kind of that situation where you would be down so many, there might be problems with quorum and getting the number of folks needed. So that would probably be one of those scenarios. That way we're just not listing a whole line of succession in here. And that's something that, again, if the unlikely event of an impeachment would ever take place and those 2 were to be met, I'm sure that the advisors, e-board, cabinet, and general senate as a whole would kind of take that to heart and make the informed decisions necessary.
Matt?
This kind of was brought up when Ashley said the vice president. I was thinking about, instead of the vice president, why not the secretary? The secretary already has a deal in confidentiality within the e-board, and I think they would be better fit rather than the vice president when it comes to that kind of stuff, when it comes to the impeachment process as a backup. So I would encourage a motion to change the vice president to the secretary.
second,
I was gonna make the amendment.
Oh, yeah, motion to amend, changing the vice president part to the secretary.
second,
All those in favor of making that change? If you're pretty, you can just. All those opposed?
Oh.
Forgot. Oh, yeah. Abstention? Anything? Anyone else or anyone else with speakers list? Oh, Brian. sorry.
So- It seems like Jay was having an issue, like, and we don't need a whole line of succession, but maybe we could put in there in the absence of the vice president, if you go to the secretary, like the absence of, like, maybe later down the line, someone can make that bill.
We have information.
Sure.
He had just stated the reason as to why that it would be put off is because of the need for a quorum, but they're also down half an e-board who can't even also vote. So it just wouldn't make sense, period, to go through all of that, to have that as a backup when it's never ever gonna come to fruition because it would be put off. And then you also don't have the necessary legal members.
Anyone else those figures this?
Motion to call this bill to question.
Second. All those in favor of calling this bill to question? All opposed? Question?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Riley Peter? Michaela? Can we please minimize?
Sorry.
Joe Pistoli?
Yes.
Alexander Robin?
Yes.
Sarah Schindler?
Yes.
Stephen Hazard?
Yes.
It's well passed.
Any other pieces of legislation? for old business? That-
Now moving along, my apologies. We are moving into the consent agenda, starting with SS48. Are we just gonna read them off? Or we gonna- Adopt.
What do you think? If we wanted to pull something out of the consent agenda, would we have to approve the consent agenda first and then pull it out, or do we pull it out first and then approve the consent agenda? So before and then we approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to remove SS48 093, a bill amending article, whatever, section 126 of the Constitution from the consent agenda.
All those in favor of pulling, oh, is there a second?
No.
Second.
All those in favor of pulling, SS48 093 out of the consent agenda? All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that, bill is now being taken out of the consent agenda. Yeah, you could still motion to.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of adopting the consent agenda? All opposed? Abstentions? The consent agenda is now adopted.
It's all of it besides the. Never mind.
Motion to introduce SS48 093, a bill amending Article 8, Section 1, 2, and 6 of the State Senate Constitution for regular consideration.
Second.
All in favor of- Would you like to elaborate?
Sure, so if we can scroll up. This it specifically deals with elections and adds timeline to section 1. Takes out some of the headers and consolidates the elections timeline from fall and spring and all of that. And also removes section 6 and condenses sections 2 and 6 together. I know there's going to be some amendments and debate on that. Looking forward to that. But specifically, the intentionality there was just to make sure that the article was consistent and flowed well and did not kind of, you had to look here for this piece of information, here for this one. A lot of the content did not change.
Yep.
Motion to amend this, so on this page between candidates and positions. On the third line from the bottom.
Second page?
Candidates
and position, like,
Right in the middle of that.
Right in the middle of the text.
Oh, right in here.
Where it says
Okay.
of the candidates.
Yep.
Okay, ready?
I'm just gonna enter so I know what I'm putting.
You know, first and foremost, is it exactly what we looked for?
Yeah. Okay.
Can go ahead and do that.
Okay, the caucuses after the election of vice president, treasurer, and secretary shall be used so that Senate members can hear speeches from the candidates for parliamentarian and director of communication. Senators will vote by secret ballot to express which candidate they favor for each position, and the student body president will utilize the Senate's votes to influence who they choose for the appointments of the positions of parliamentarian and director of communication.
All those in favor of making that very long amendment? All opposed?
Point of inquiry.
Abstentions? I'll get to that in 1 second. Okay. That's proof. Okay, go ahead.
With this secret ballot, there's potentially some legislation coming to the floor that discusses a confidentiality statement. Is there going to be some confidentiality within having a secret ballot so this can't be discussed outside of the caucus?
So are you asking whether or not like the
So.
results of the vote will be
Like, is, like, I'm not, I don't know if I'm missing it, but should there be in this section some type of like confidentiality is, you know, or is that just strictly?
Yeah.
No, you're good, you're good.
Sure. There's always an understanding that, all the information discussed in the election should remain confidential. So for example, with our special election, anything that was discussed about our candidates should remain confidential and should remain in the room. You should not be discussing with any of the candidates or any other members on campus. And so that same respect should be given to all of our candidates for any other executive positions in the future, including these members. And with that amendment that is hopefully to be made in our bylaws, I would hope that would refer to this.
As well, okay,
As well, yeah.
okay, great, thanks.
Or actually point of inquiry, rather, because I'm entirely sure, but only the president has the results of the secret ballot, correct?
That is.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Heard your motion. Alex?
I have a question on how the process would work. Will it work similarly to how internal elections work, the consultative piece? And then we ask them questions, like how we do for treasurer, secretary, and vice president?
Yes.
Okay.
Brian?
And then, speaking on that, getting off that, will we do like the pros and cons list and then like vote after that, after we like discuss amongst ourselves about values of each candidate?
Point of parliamentary procedure that information is going to be up to the future president and future, I guess, rest of the executive boards at that point, the rest of the vice president, secretary, and treasurer will be elected. So that is not within the conference.
Okay.
My question is, how have past like executive board elections work? How have they, like, has it changed from parliamentarian to parliamentarian, or have they had like the same procedure?
Like internal elections?
Yeah,
So that is not up to the parliamentarian, that's up to the president. The president kind of decides how internal elections work from year to year. They basically run the same way, but the internal elections handbook that me and Ali created really kind of outlined how we want it to look in the future, because it's been discussed multiple times how candidates going for vice president, treasurer, and secretary don't like how it's different year to year. So we're trying to make it streamlined. That way candidates going for the position year after year would be expecting and knowing what to expect coming in, because it has happened before where when elections do happen, candidates have no idea how it's going to run. So yes, so it is all streamlined now in the internal elections handbook. So you can look at that, and that's how the elections will run from here on out. And me and Ali are making, actually, no, never mind. Take away that. We've made plenty of updates on it.
Point of information.
Sure.
And again, if the next executive board, whoever that might be, wants to amend, edit how those internal processes would go, they can amend those as they see. If they don't like how, these elections have gone in the past, that's their will and prerogative to edit them. But
Motion of friendly amendment, please capitalize secret ballot.
where?
Up by senators will vote by secret ballot on the third line of the second, right there.
Appreciate you, thank you.
Anyone else to the speakers list?
Is that one?
I don't think that's.
It's okay.
All in favor of calling this for the question? All opposed? Abstentions will not be called the question.
Kevin Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Ralph Alzine,
Yes.
Mike Rowe,
Yes.
Yes.
Ali Schoenfeld, yes, Matt Taylor.
Yes.
Mackenzie Mortimer, yes, Stephen Megan,
Yes.
Josh Van Gara, Isabel Valier, yes. Louise Ugarte,
Yes.
Ashley Harris, yes. Riley Peter, Jenny. Fiona Dolan, yes. Michaela Ack, Joe Piscola,
No.
Alexander Robbins,
Yes.
Stephen Elznick.
Yes.
All right, this vote passes.
Skip zero.
You skipped your one.
You're welcome. You get a vote.
I'm so sorry, you're.
But this year.
Yeah.
Wow, Ali.
Wow.
Where?
Unacceptable.
Oh, it went on to the next page because the amendment was so massive. I apologize. My bad. That's on me.
All right.
Yeah, your vote was recorded.
Any
So
other
sorry.
piece of the legislation scroll business? Adam,
Motion to begin debate on the consent agenda.
Second.
all those in favor of beginning debate on the consent agenda? All those opposed? Abstentions, okay, we're not gonna debate on the consent agenda unless you have different.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So for this, apologies in advance. The different items on the consent agenda are in different documents. So we'll kind of take each one as it comes. These are all very slight grammatical changes, updating language that we just passed, such as Director of Communications, Treasurer, elections, committee to elections council, committees to committees and councils, so on, starting with this bill. As we know, there's senators and Senate members. Senators are those that are voting on all types of legislation. And there's Senate members who include our parliamentarian and president and soon to be director of communications. So this just outlines that any Senate member can be impeached. Changes him and herself to themselves. Few other things. Same thing there, just taking out a few changes with the resignation procedure to align that with current practice and what the bylaws say. And then moving along to the next bill.
Roll dice.
And this one dealing with committees, this adds committees and councils to all the language. So it'd be standing committees and standing councils.
Jeff,
Since we're on this bill, I wanted, wait. All right, oh, okay, never mind, this is a different bill. Sorry.
We can see here, there's just section headers and adding by the board, adding executive board, because board's very ambiguous, few changes like that. And then here's just adding standing councils again and adding new general Senate meetings, a few other slate things, adding specials. And then for voting, just clarifying that this section, assemblies require 2/3 of voting members before business can be conducted. And all senators must be recognized, just adds another sentence to this to make sure that it functions with current practice. And then finally,
wait, pause. Joe?
So for 095, my question was, because the line on section 2 says standing committees and councils must meet at least twice a month for each calendar month and semester, and with the exception of whatever. My question was kind of in regards to the ad hoc committees, ad hoc councils, committees, like bylaw review and sort of along that line, because they kind of like dissolve and they come and go as they please. So I feel like this kind of creates that gray area. And I don't really know what question I'm trying to propose here, but do you know what I'm trying to get at?
So ad hoc committees are not standing. Ad hoc committees, that's why we clarify what standing councils are. So, that standing councils and standing committees are standing versus ad hoc, standing. Ad hoc committees and or councils, are ones that come about just to do the job that they are asked to do, and like they have a specific purpose, for example, bylaw. But bylaw is one of the odder ones in the sense that they do meet more regularly. But one more like SLIC or winter eliminations doesn't meet as regularly, or they, because SLIC didn't meet like all last semester, they might not meet every week. Or, winter, you might have more to say on it, and neither did, winter illuminations maybe. Like maybe twice, is that more?
Oh, no, that was.
Oh, you're like, yes, I'm winter illuminations, okay,
Yes.
but, they do meet like on different schedules, not so as often as the standing committee or council, but ad hoc committees and or councils are all of that and plays under that classification to give themselves that like flexibility with meeting.
Alex?
I just want to like clarify for like, we meet once a week, but it's not to the extent of how a normal ad hoc, like an exploration ad hoc goes. Like we don't have like formal meeting, for us, we don't have formal meeting minutes. We just have a conversation, myself, my co-chair and Adrian, we all sit together, have a conversation. This is what we need to do by next week. Okay, let's get it done. That's basically how those for Slick anyways, that's how that typically works.
Yeah, well, part of inquiry, I don't exactly know how to phrase this, but what exactly was the point of having the consent agenda if we go and debate, and I think I'm just missing something there.
Point of information, we are, right now, we're just specifically saying like, this is what this bill is, this is what that is. If we want to pull something and vote on it individually, that's what we can. We can ask clarifying questions like Joe just did, that's totally fine. If we want to debate it like in depth, then we can pull it and do that. But the clarifying questions are totally fine and valid and welcome.
We'll be voting on all of them together, just to
Yeah.
approve all
So what was adopting the consent agenda, was saying yes, we can do these all together?
of them. Yes,
Weirdly?
yes.
Yeah.
Jay? Anyone else? Adam?
And then just moving on to the last part of the consent agenda, which would be 6, yeah, or 9.6. And here, section titles and making sure that the sections correctly. So a few grammatical changes, a few clarifying current practices. Again, nothing that's overtly controversial because it is current practice and slightly grammatical in nature.
Anyone else on the speakers list or any motions?
Motion to-
Consent agenda question?
Second.
All in favor of calling the consent agenda to question? All opposed? Abstentions? There is not being called a question.
Adam Kevin,
Yes.
Zach Goodman,
Yes.
Scott Hunty,
Yes.
Mike Rowe,
Yes.
Yes.
Ellie Schoenfeld, yes, Matt Tully,
Yes.
Mackenzie Morgan,
Yes.
Jason Regan,
Yes.
Josh Rangara, Isabel Bollier,
Yes.
and Jay Garcia.
Yes.
Ashley Hayes.
Yes.
Riley Peter.
Yeah.
Jenna Gomes,
Yes.
Michaela Ash,
Yes.
Joe Patillo,
Yes.
Alexandra Roberts.
Yes.
Kira Schindler,
Yes.
Stephen. Hill.
Yes.
All right, these votes.
10:30.
Second. Oh, that was an issue, okay. Motion closed, oh my gosh. All those in favor? All opposed? Sentence, okay, open, not closed.
Second.
All in favor, open. Opposed? Sentence, business now open. Any pieces of legislation? Zach?
Introducing SS48 XXX, a bill ratifying the budgets for Class A, B, C, D, and E charters for the 2022-23 academic year for regular consideration. Introducing SS48 XXX, a bill providing reserve funding to WQRI for the renewal of the wide orbit automation system for regular consideration.
Any other pieces of legislation? Adam?
Introducing SS48-XXX, a bill waiving RHA of the student senate requirements for the academic year 2022-2023 for regular consideration.
Any other pieces of legislation for new business?
Motion closed.
All in favor of closing it? All is opposed. Okay, the business is now closed. I have an announcement. So I'll go first. So my announcement to you all is that unfortunately, due to personal reasons and circumstances, I will be withdrawing from the presidential election and general senator election. It's been great working with y'all. This is not a decision that I made lightly. But I really feel like it's going to be the best for me and give me the opportunity to pursue more opportunities in internships and getting ready for law school, which is a task all in its own. So really want to focus on that. So yeah,
Thank you for all that you've done this year.
thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, thanks guys, appreciate it. Adam.
As a reminder, we do have a caucus afterwards to discuss all of the slick nominations and Senate awards. So please, we'll take a break and then we'll jump into it.
Matt.
Actually, Izzy was first.
I'm sorry.
So-
Go ahead.
Thank you, because I have a very important announcement. We have the sustainability walk tomorrow. Thank you for all who are joining from the Student Life Committee and extra senators that I decided to interrogate in the office to demand to join me. Please, I do encourage you to attend. We have a lot of people who chat about sustainability. This is a great time to really try and work together to identify how sustainable campus is and what can be done going forward. to improve that thereafter. It's 2 to 3 p.m. tomorrow. You'll be a part of a building group. It's already all set up. All you got to do is come. So let me know. We do need some more people because some of these buildings are bigger than the amount of people that are looking at them. Some groups are at 4 and they're observing 2 buildings. So please do make your best effort to try and attend this with us. Thank you.
Matt?
Academic Affairs is still looking for, if, I know it's a tough time, 12 p.m. on Wednesday. We do have a very large volume of textbook scholarships. If one more person would be willing to, never mind, withdrawn. Ignore what I just said. Never mind. Stay away from me.
Ryan?
Just a reminder, please get your club monthly reports in by the 7th at 5 p.m. It is a required assignment, so if you do not do it, there will be consequences.
That's scary, Brian.
Scare me, Brian.
Speaking of SLIC that is coming up, next week I can officially announce the theme, so be prepared for that.
Mike?
Okay, so budgeting weekend. It's this weekend. So you too can be a part of budgeting weekend. So
I am so excited.
exactly. See, take that energy. Come to budgeting weekend, please. We need people. Actually, I'm just joking. We're forcing the finance committee to go, but if you are interested, you can contact me. And then for the finance committee, just so you know, to be ready, Hawks Herald will be coming in with their budgeting request this week. So, yeah.
You too can look
Zach?
like me.
Mine is gonna be the same as Mike's. Let me know if you're interested as well.
Michaela?
I'm just gonna go off of Izzy's, if you know the engineering building, please come help me.
We literally have 2 people examining that building with 4 people. That is not sustainable. Thank you.
I have never even been in the same building.
Same.
Not once.
With you, I've never
Is it, are you my building manager for that?
Yes, I
Sorry.
am. Glad you're begging for help.
Please.
Please.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Woo.
All those
I
opposed?
was gonna like slap my
Abstentions?
hands, you know.
Now adjourned.
I have a question. Do we have to?
It's at-
I know.